1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. So welcome to the Bobby Lee Bitcoin podcast. Here today, I have my good friend Clayton Jones. I've known Clayton for over a dozen years, and we've known him for how long? 15 years?
Something along those lines, yeah.
15, 16 years.
Yeah, I visited Shanghai, somehow managed to crash your birthday party, if I recall, and
many years ago.
Kind of been friends ever since, yeah.
Yes, that's right. Those are pre-Bitcoin days.
Pre-Bitcoin days, yeah.
So Clayton's...
Is that BBC before Bitcoin?
Before Bitcoin, BBC. That's right, before Bitcoin, right. Yes. We're actually recording this in Shanghai today. Mm-hmm. And Clayton's back visiting China. Yes. He used to live out here. For how many years did you live in Shanghai?
Roughly 2010 to 2013, so a little over 2.5. It's my... amazing to be back. I've visited since I left, but since the pandemic, haven't been back in 3.5, 4 years, and it's always good to come. Shanghai is a bit of my home, and it's always good to be home.
Yes. So you've been in the U.S. for the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And the joke is that you bought a shitload of Bitcoins in 2013 and moved back to America.
If that was the story, I would be traveling in Shanghai in a very different experience. But
when did you first hear about Bitcoin? It was 2013, right?
It may even been I first heard about Bitcoin actually through you. Yeah. I think kind of
2012 maybe.
Yeah, something along those lines. And so I think you had, we had sort of a little bit of it was a little bit of a small tribe of us that you spend a lot of time together. I miss those days.
Yes.
And I think you probably came in telling us about this Bitcoin thing, and we're like, oh, there's Bobby with another crazy idea, but shame on us, good on you.
Yeah. So Clayton today is a product manager at Google, right?
Yes.
On what, Google Ads?
Google Ads, yes.
Okay. Uh-huh. Any crypto related stuff with that line of work?
Not particularly. I think kind of. Blockchain starts to permeate more and more of the world here and there, but not any kind of cryptocurrency type of work now.
Yeah. But Silicon Valley. So maybe share with us a little bit from your perspective as a tech guy.
Yeah.
Living in Silicon Valley, working for Google. Silicon Valley marquee company. What's your take? What's the take of crypto and Bitcoin and digital currencies in the Valley?
It's been interesting. I think like any. I think like any technology, there's a bit of the hype cycle that goes in, oh, this is going to be the next biggest thing on earth, the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then there's sort of that trough of disillusionment. And then there's sort of, and then reality starts to set in. And so, I think kind of, and this is true of, I think, any kind of technology that we've seen kind of come through the valley at different times.
How many times of that hype cycle have you seen?
Oh, that probably. I was going to say more than once.
More than once.
We'll just say I remember when they were saying, "Oh, the internet's a bunch of hype."
Yes.
I'm old enough where I wasn't, or I'm young enough where I don't know that they said this. I missed the personal computer hype cycle, but I certainly remember them talking about the internet was going to be this fad. But whether it was the internet, mobile. So many things kind of go through that general sort of trend, and I think the truth is there's always a little bit of hype in these things, but then there's also durability. And I think that's the part where you start to see, hey, what's really interesting here? And I think the hype cycle is important. It brings awareness, brings people's attention to something, gets smart, thoughtful minds kind of looking into it. And then I think kind of, as you said, some of the things that you thought made sense did not, but some of those things really last. And kind of, I think that's the exciting part about all of these things in technology is, things can get inflated and bubbles exist, but after those bubbles, pop, there's usually something really solid there that's really interesting and really compelling. So I think kind of crypto, I'd say, again, from my perspective, I think kind of had that. I feel like you were pre hype cycle. You were telling me about Bitcoin. So
tell us. You were one of the earliest people who knew me back then when I got into Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So you knew me BBC, right?
I knew you BBC, absolutely.
So the question is, what was back then? This is like 10, 13, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
What was your impression of me talking about Bitcoin back in 2011, 2012?
Well, it was really interesting because I think kind of prior to our Bitcoin conversations, you were always talking about gold and investing in kind of hard specie, hard currency. And so, you had discussed that a lot. And then probably, my memory, which is probably faulty, was one day you stopped talking about gold and started talking about Bitcoin. I'm sure it was a little bit more of a gradual shift than memory. And, and I think it was really interesting, right? Like I think kind of initially it was interesting on more of a intellectual academic kind of pursuit and level. Like, again, the group at that time, we were all, kind of nerdy with all love and respect.
I forgot to mention, Clayton and I went to Stanford together.
Yes.
I think a few years apart, but we're all alum from there.
Yeah. And so I think there was sort of, I think it initially was like, oh, blockchain, isn't that kind of interesting, kind of cool. And then, I think we all like to wax poetic on some of the implications of what this meant for currency and in governments and so on and so forth. And so I think initially, some of our conversations were very, I don't want to say academic, but maybe they were a little bit more intellectual and academic about what this could mean, what this could do. But then I think kind of somewhere in there, again, you began to kind of think about this, hey, this is a real investment vehicle and something to kind of think through. And, and then I think kind of there was questions of, oh, could this be, how would you maybe do like regular transactions? I remember that being a series of conversations in the early days and such. So those are kind of some of my earliest memories of sort of Bitcoin and sort of this crypto set of conversations that we were having at that time.
Yeah, I remember us doing giving talks at the Stanford Club of Shanghai about that Bitcoin blockchain and mining and all that. Yeah.
Well, and then the other thing I'd be remiss to say is, one of the things I've always appreciated about you is you've always said, all right, if this is just an intellectual and academic conversation, I don't care. Like, put your money where your mouth is, and get some skin in the game. And I should have listened to you at that time. But you put some skin in the game, shall we say, much at a very smart time to do so. And I remember you kind of good-naturedly teasing, another friend of ours, Seth, and myself on, right. Get your act together, guys. Come on, like.
Yeah. So you should also share about your story of the wedding gift.
Oh,
in
yes.
Was it 2013?
2000. So coming up on my 10th anniversary.
Yes.
And another friend from that era, the gentleman by the name of Alex, gave my wife and I a Bitcoin for our wedding gift, and at that time it was roughly $70-ish. Dollars.
Under $100.
Under
a small wedding gift.
Yeah.
For a wedding gift, it's a small wedding gift for summer of 2013.
Yeah. But given all the conversations we had been having, I was like, wow, this is what a timely. This is almost like a time capsule gift. Is sort of how I envisioned it. And so I think I got a wallet set up and so on and so forth. And in any event, like we've held on to it. We've joked it was, with all respect to all the other nice gifts that we received, it was the best wedding gift we ever got, or hopefully we'll ever get. And we're holding on to that. We've joked that that's going to pay for my daughter, who's now almost 7, her college tuition. College tuitions are going up, so we'll see exactly how much of the college tuition it takes. Yeah. But
hopefully well, back then that couldn't even pay for anything. But,
yes, it would have paid for a book. I think
it's appreciated a lot faster than. But even though college tuitions are going up fast, Bitcoin has done well in the last 10 years.
Yeah. No, for sure. And so we still have another 10 or so years before she goes to college. And so. We'll see what happens to college tuition, but we're hoping for some similar appreciation on that one.
Do you personally? People ask me this all the time, but maybe I ask you, what do you think the price of Bitcoin will be when your child becomes of college age in next 15 years?
I could make a guess.
Yeah, what's your guess?
I don't know.
What's your optimistic scenario? What's your pessimistic scenario?
Yeah, I feel like this is one of those things you're going to play this back to me in 10 years, and whatever I guess is just going to be off. So this is just a note for future Clayton. Whatever you're about to say, I'm not angry with you. Bobby should tease you on this repeatedly. I'm going to say
now it's between $25,000 and $30,000.
I was going to say it's roughly 25ish K.
Yeah.
I think I don't think from 70 to 25,000 that would certainly be nice. That seems much. I do see this as a really interesting investment vehicle. I think we are starting, from my perspective, I think we are starting to see some of the, we've come out of we're out of the hype cycle, maybe some of the trough of disillusionment. Now we're going to see. So I'm going to go long on this, and I'm going to say I'd like to see it maybe 10x over the course.
10x, so $250,000.
$250,000 is
fair enough.
Yeah, that's going to
high number.
That's going to be a high number. As I said, I'm sure 10 years from now we're going to look back and either laugh because that's ridiculously low or ridiculously high. But that's the nature of prediction.
Yeah, I think very likely it won't be anywhere near $250,000.
Okay,
like you say, either be much higher, or be much lower.
Yeah. I think that's probably fair.
So we'll see.
Yeah. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah, which is not hard to guess. Good. So let's share a little bit. Back then, so how did Alex give you that one Bitcoin? The summer of 2013.
Gosh.
Was it a challenge? Maybe share with us perspective.
Yeah.
Like you said a wallet. How did you do that? Who helped you?
Yeah.
What was the process? Just to share. I mean, very few people, especially my podcast guests, very few people actually have experience 10 years ago with Bitcoin.
Yeah. Right? So I didn't have a wallet at the time.
Did not.
I did not. And so I think it was like he actually wrote me a card saying, I will give you one Bitcoin.
So it was a promissory note. It was a promissory note.
Exactly. I will give you one Bitcoin. And excuse me. And so I'm now trying to remember. I can't remember the original wallet that we set up, but then somewhere.
Was it, by the way, so he promised you that within the card.
Yeah.
And then how much later did he actually give you the Bitcoin, so to speak?
I saw that. And I was like, again, I was like, gosh, I should really get on top of this. Because I think at that point.
It was going to double to $150.
Well, I was going to say, I think if I remember, when we first started looking at Bitcoin, I want to say it was like $7 to $10. That may not be right.
That's right.
That may not be right, but that's sort of my memory.
2012, 2011. For sure.
So I was like, wow, 10x, man. I better jump on this. Maybe I'll write it to 700. Wouldn't that be awesome? Wouldn't that be a fun story? So I think it happened pretty quickly. I honestly don't recall who I started up the first wallet with. Okay. About a year later.
But you have it today, right? You're pretty sure you still have it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But I ended up, I want to say somewhere like a year, so 2014, 2015, if memory serves, I ended up kind of switching it over to CoinDesk at that
Coinbase.
Time.
Coinbase. You put it on the Coinbase exchange.
Coinbase. Yes. Yeah. A friend of mine had gone to work there, and at this point, other
someone I know or not?
No, just a friend of mine from kind of around, or I don't think,
yeah.
And so he had gone to Coinbase, and
you set up the account on Coinbase
and transferred over my Bitcoin, and
excellent.
And then so that was kind of my first wallet at the time, and. And
it's still there?
Still there. Yeah.
And they've made it a lot more strict now. I don't know if you've logged in recently.
Yeah.
You have to do a lot of provide a lot of personal information, social security number, tax ID, your state driver license and all that.
Yeah.
They want to make sure you are who you are.
No, they absolutely do. And because I think it was roughly about 2 years ago, my wife and I were trying to.
The lights keep going off. They think. Go ahead.
No worries. Roughly 2 years ago or so, we got a little Dogecoin fever. I think we got a little excited about that, and so we ended up kind of buying maybe at the wrong end of the hype cycle on that one. So we ended up, kind of having to go back in. So we kind of provided a lot more PII, as you were saying, which was really interesting.
Lot more what?
PII, personal information.
Got it.
And such. And
Coinbase required that.
Yeah. And it was very interesting at that time, just because, again, working in tech, working in various things like ads. Such PII is a very interesting. It's very valuable data. You always want to be very mindful of who you're sharing it with, where you're giving it.
Do you feel comfortable giving Coinbase your personal information, address, name, what else? Social security number.
I can't remember.
Mobile phone number, cell phone
Yeah,
number.
I don't remember. I can't remember if
email
we gave.
address.
Yeah, there was a lot there. I think I did at that.
Oh, if they even ask you
Time.
for your income level, for example, what's your income?
They may have. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember all of the information now.
Yeah.
I decided I was going to be okay with it. I think kind of that was also at a time when I think Coinbase was certainly, I think doing.
Yeah,
you know,
Coinbase has done well.
Yeah,
very
and certainly
well.
had I think kind of had a very strong reputation at the time. Obviously, I think kind of some of the, just kind of recent events and things that you hear, give you a little pause. Again, I think kind of one of the things that's hard here is, obviously in that hype cycle, I think this is even back to some of our earlier conversations. This area does flirt with some interesting kind of regulatory areas and such, and and I think kind of there are areas that we see this across the board. Technology goes past regulation, and now I think some of that's starting to be revisited to some extent.
Well, what's your take with all the recent flurry of regulatory activity? So I don't know if you've seen SEC has sued Coinbase for offering securities, being a unregistered brokerage, if not company selling unregistered securities and so on. Any thoughts on that? Do you care about that? Is that?
I mean, it's something I'm paying attention to. I don't know that I have particular thoughts on that issue. I do think what we are seeing is, again, I do think technology and people push beyond, regulations are set up for a moment in time.
Yeah.
And if, I think, you can go back to the Industrial Revolution, and we look back on some of the practices and labor practices and banking practices at those times, and we're aghast. We think, how could people possibly do that? And this is where regulation came in and tried to bring more, hopefully, transparency, hopefully fairness, hopefully, things that we as a society value into this process. And I think kind of, again, I think we've seen this a number of times in various forms of technology and such. And so I think kind of crypto's at that phase. And so I don't know that I have strong feelings on the Coinbase's kind of case in particular, but I think this is kind of indicative just of the space, that this is the era where regulation is coming in. And I think this, again, Coinbase may not agree with this, but I think kind of in the medium to long term, this is a good thing. I think there are gray areas, and this is going to help us kind of get to clarity. And again, I think this kind of comes back to a little bit kind of, there are things here that are durable, things here that are important, and then there's some stuff that maybe, I don't know, maybe we should at least agree that this is okay and this is not. And I think this is going to help us get to that sort of clarity. And so I think that part of it is good, even if it's messy journey to get there.
It's gonna be messy. Coinbase has pushed back, obviously, on the lawsuits and all that, and rightly so, right? But I think the end result should be good, and I have faith in the U.S. system. I've seen the regulatory situation in China, and I've seen it in other countries, and I think overall the system of government, the way how regulation works in the U.S., I have faith in that eventually it gets sorted out properly. It may not. It may start off a little bit in the wrong direction, but it'll get corrected. Because there's more than one person working at it.
I think that's a good thing. I do think what's so interesting about so much of this is that there are just sort of the global implications here, and how does something like Bitcoin and crypto, which is truly global in nature. I mean, by design, really.
Yeah, of course.
How do you navigate that across different governments with different policies and such? And I don't know. I think there's, I think, and this isn't totally, just crypto, but just sort of, all of these things that are happening with the internet and that are internet backed that really do have global implications. How do we as a global community kind of sort this out and figure this out? It'll be interesting. I don't pretend to know the answer there. But it'll be fun.
I'm curious, in Silicon Valley, you've been living there for long. I used to live in Silicon Valley 20 years ago.
Back when there were
I guess
farms
20
there and
15,
peach
15,
farm.
20.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Back when Silicon Valley was all farms.
Oh yeah,
and,
orchids and orchards and all that. Yeah, cherry orchards. I remember there really was a cherry orchard.
Yep.
And then it turned into an apartment complex.
Yep.
So what's the climate there in terms of crypto? Do you hear conversations about cryptocurrency, about Web3, about blockchain?
Yeah.
NFTs. What's the latest you've seen or heard in the last 6 months, 12 months?
I think there was a lot of talk about this. I want to say 12 to 18 months ago. And
by the way, that would be the time before the bear market took over.
Yeah.
So it's before the collapse of Luna, UST, and subsequent FTX and all that.
Yeah.
So it was a bullish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so there, I remember reading articles. Artist sells this, or someone sold the first tweet.
Yes, that's right.
And I guess it's a little more FTC based. So I definitely think there was, in some ways, I think that was sort of this, this amazing hype and sort of, people were buying and selling, very rapidly and turning profits or not, and so on and so forth. So it was this very kind of, in some ways, I think, very heated market because I think there was just a lot of no one really knew what to expect.
Yeah. So was there hate or was there jealousy?
Probably both.
Yeah.
I think kind of. Sure. Who doesn't want to double their money overnight? Yeah. If you got to get rich, getting rich quick's maybe not a bad way of doing it.
I actually like get rich slow. I actually don't like get rich quick. Yeah.
All right. Well, let me ask you to explain that more later.
So get rich quick. I think the issue is, so on the surface people like that, but there's actually no formula to get rich quick.
Yeah.
Right? It's basically you're taking a big risk.
Yeah.
Imagine taking all your money, go to the casino, and put it on red on the roulette wheel, right? Well, you could double your money, but the odds are you're not, right? In terms of statistical chances, you have a greater chance of losing all your money than to double your money.
That's true. Yeah.
So, but whereas get rich slow, it would be the idea of taking what you've earned, whether it's money, assets, whatnot, and it doesn't have to be a large amount, it could be a small amount, and making smart investments.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be Bitcoin. It could be in gold. It could be real estate. It could be stock market. It could be whatnot. And the idea is to make prudent, smart investments. And what's smart and not smart will be based on your experience, research, reading about financial investments, and then over time slowly grow that nest egg with compounded effect. So get rich slow, over a course of 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, become wealthy and financially independent.
Yeah, no, I think that resonates. I think there's also, this is kind of what you described, is I think there's just a mental maturation that comes with that. Because, certainly, you read about someone who wins the lotto and then is broke.
Oh, yeah. That's the curse, right? The curse of winning the lottery.
Exactly.
A lot of people, it's happened.
So I think there is just sort of a mental maturity that maybe get rich slow sort of gives you that chance to mature alongside your investments to some extent.
And also it doesn't spoil you, right? Most people who get rich quick end up very happy because they got rich so fast, and then they end up spending it ridiculously fast.
Yep.
And then soon enough, they've spent all their earnings and gains.
Yeah. No, that resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of back to your question on Silicon Valley. I do think there was this, there was probably some hate, some jealousy, but certainly a lot of hype, a lot of talk. I think everyone was very excited about it. But then, as you said, I think there was sort of, as interest rates started to go up, I think there was this, I think there was this hypothesis or theory that crypto was basically immune to, or was maybe a hedge against interest rate changes. And then I think kind of didn't quite work out that way. And so then, I think whether that was a valid hypothesis, I actually don't know. But I think kind of, once that proved not the case, then I think kind of in the same way you get caught in a positive feedback loop, sometimes you get caught in a negative feedback loop to some extent. And so now I think I think I feel like it's a little bit more of a neutral tone in the groups that I talk to and kind of hear from, and that I think kind of right after sort of right after sort of that hedge theory was sort of, disproved, or at least kind of disproved in those circumstances. I think there was kind of just disillusionment and just sort of, I knew it kind of mentality. I think kind of now things have cooled off a little bit. I think in general, Silicon Valley's just been dealing with lots of, various layoffs, various kind of macroeconomic conditions. And I feel like that's sort of been a little bit more that the eye of attention, or eye of Sauron, as I like to call it, is sort of shifted from that to kind of just dealing with, kind of more mainstream, very direct issues and such. So, yeah.
Well, what's interesting, to tie it back to Bitcoin and crypto about the layoffs and all that, is it's kind of like you connect the dots, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're seeing is we're seeing layoffs, but what's behind that is just the global economic uncertainty. Yeah. Right. So not just in America, rest of the world, mm-hmm. Europe, Asia, many countries, this post-pandemic, there was a surge of economic activity post-pandemic. So that made a lot of businesses and sectors, high growth, high revenue. Mm-hmm. At the same time, there are other aspects of the society just has not come back. Yeah. Whether it's like downtown office space in San Francisco, whether it's other factories and industries and so on. China's going through some economic challenges, of course, right? And I'm sure other countries as well, the U.S. as well. But behind that is a lot of it comes back down to monetary policy, like interest rates, right? So interest rates are affecting all of this. Why mm-hmm. do interest rates go up? Because of inflation. Mm-hmm. Why is inflation going up? Well, because there's so much activity, all the prices go mm-hmm. up. But why is that? Fundamentally, it's not so much that the value of stuff is more expensive. Like when food mm-hmm. costs and oil, energy goes up, it's not that it's more expensive. Well, why is it more expensive? Well, it's in high demand for sure, but I think fundamentally it's more expensive because there's just more money around. Yeah. Right. So if you look at society, everyone's richer now, even though there are a lot of still people, poor people who are barely making ends meet. But if you look at the raw unit of dollars and euros and renminbi and all that, there's just so much more of that in the world today than there was 10 years ago. Yep. And 10 years ago was a lot of that compared to 20 years ago. Yep. So that's what's the fundamental driver of inflation and high costs. Mm-hmm. I think it's just too much money. Yeah. And why is there too much money? There's too much printing, and behind all that, monetary policy, fiat money. Yeah. And that's why Bitcoin was invented to tackle this problem. And this is like 13, 14 years ago. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that a lot of that resonates. And I think kind of some of this was, I think some of this too, just on the map, there was we saw this huge shift to a lot of things again online. Yes. And I think people felt like that was a fundamental shift, a fundamental step function change in how humans and people were going to respond and behave. But as still not clear to me that we're truly post-pandemic, like COVID's still there on some level. But outside of that, I think people are returning to more in person. And, I think we are realizing that, we, for the most part, are fundamentally social creatures, and not everything is going to be online. We do want to have things, in person experiences and such. And, some of that, certainly impacting buying and shopping behavior, but even just, as we return to office or not, as the case may be, I think there's just a lot of things. There's this sort of, again, we're in this very interesting transitionary phase that in some ways I think the pandemic both accelerated, and now I think we're all figuring out, do we like that acceleration or are we, and so I think just as a society, we're kind of figuring it out. And unfortunately that sort of, that messy transition that we're in just leads to a lot of, as you said, kind of uncertainty and, lots of dollars or lots of currency in the system, again, just increases this all. The biggest, to me, the biggest unknown factor is interest rates, right? Yeah. So today, the way it works today is that the Federal Reserve, mm-hmm. the U.S. Federal Reserve, they set the benchmark rate mm-hmm. for the U.S. dollar, which sets an example for the rest of the world. Yeah, kind of a cascading effect. So you like it or not, these powerful, rich, old white men sitting at the board of the Federal Reserve, they're setting interest rate decisions on a monthly basis. Mm-hmm. and it really has outsized ramifications for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, it just echoes out, right? So we've seen rates go from practically nothing to now 4 or 5%, and it might even go to 6 or 7% by year's end or by next year. And the question is, will that really trigger a recession in the U.S.?
Yeah.
Will it really trigger? I mean, the housing prices, globally are under pressure now.
Yep.
There's something called now. There's a lot of listings, whether it's commercial or residential real estate, but there's just not a lot of transactions.
Yeah.
So
we've certainly seen that in San Francisco. Yeah. Just kind of a real, very, very big change. My real estate history in San Francisco doesn't go back too far, but just sort of just even what's the inventory that's available and how that sort of works. And my understanding, I was having coffee with a friend of mine here in Shanghai earlier today, and he was saying he was looking to buy a home. And even in Shanghai, housing prices are starting to fall. It's not just in secondary or tertiary cities here in China, but even in Shanghai, which has had such a unbelievably fast-growing real estate market for many, many years. I mean, almost a generation of just crazy housing price growth is kind of taking not just a pause, but some steps back, which is very different.
And that's very scary. And it's not just Shanghai. It could be anywhere, right? Because when housing prices start to fall and when people realize it, what happens, they just hold off their purchase.
Yep.
They're like, if it's falling, I might as well wait another 6 months, wait another year and a half. And then that sort of herd mentality causes the price to fall more and more. Yeah. So that's what's really, really scary.
Yeah.
And the rising interest rates is making mortgage payments more difficult, making it hard to get larger loans. So you can only get small loans, and you have to put a higher down payment, and it's really constricting your overall purchase budget. Yeah. So
No, it'll be. I mean, I think kind of in general, I want to say, and again, not an expert here, but I think in the U.S., since kind of the great financial crisis of 2008, there had been, probably not in all locations, but just such increases in housing prices, and I think kind of, I believe this is true in the United States, but probably in lots of places worldwide. I mean, the biggest asset class most people own is their home, effectively. Yeah,
that's right.
And if that's going up, you feel good. When that's going down, that doesn't feel so nice or as nice for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So good. Well, good chatting. So let's do, before we wrap up. Let me ask one more topic about Web3.
Oh boy!
And since you work at Google, what's your take? Because Google represents the sort of the Web2, right? It's the marquee, the most prominent company, one of the most prominent, right, in the Web2 world. Google, Facebook, and all that. And you've worked at Facebook before as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So as someone who is well embedded in the Web2 world, in those companies, what's your take as the so-called Web3 industry and the Web3 market? Do you dismiss it completely, or do we? It's
I mean,
do you know what? How would you define Web3? By the way,
I was actually going to say I feel like Web3 is sort of this amorphous definition of like a bunch of cool new things that people have
shilling.
It's so like I was actually going to ask you is like, what is Web3 in this case, and how would you define Web3, and I can give you my take on that.
I do think it's amorphous. I think Web3 is just a catch-all term to lump in the crypto community that's moved from the crypto community started as cypherpunks before Bitcoin. And then there were Bitcoin hardcore people when Bitcoin came out.
Yep.
And then you had all these altcoin promoters, people pushing their own coins. And then led to ICOs and tokens and all that. And then for a while it was about all these other chains providing value. And then it was DeFi. There was DeFi summer in year 2020. So DeFi, decentralized finance, and then there's NFTs, explosion of that, investors. So now I think the latest term in the last year and a half is Web3. It's a catch-all term. And the way I distinguish it is, so I used to work at Yahoo, right? So Web 1, Web 2 kind of thing. And
It's back, by the way.
Yahoo is
Yahoo's
back?
back. Yeah, I think I heard.
That's big. In what way? You're pulling my leg. So Web3. So the idea is that with Web 1, Web 2, these large companies, platforms, whether it's Twitter, Google, Facebook, or even Apple, they control the data because they allow the users. They require the users to sign in, have an account.
Yeah.
And when a user participates in whether it's social media, online communities, all that, the data is all shared online, and the companies utilize that to make revenue, advertising. Yeah. Right. And then obviously there's a trade-off between user privacy.
Yeah.
There's a saying goes, if you don't, what's the saying? Like, you're the product. If you're not paying for the product, then you're the product.
You are the product.
If you're not paying for it, right? So at least the idea with Netflix is you're paying for the service, so you're not the product. You're not being sold. But with Google, if you're not paying for Google Maps and Google Email, then what's?
I always go. Yeah. I think Larry Page, one of the founders of Google, I believe this is a quote of his. And I think a good ad is good. A good ad is good content. And sure. I think that's particularly true with search ads. Like if I'm looking, if I'm telling Google what I want, we show you a good ad. I feel good about that. But
that's good. Good point. Yeah. But back to Web3, the idea is that the Web3 users now would control their information, and through the use of private keys, cryptography, just like users can have and control and invest in their tokens and cryptocurrencies. The idea is for Web3 users to control and have access to their data. Whether it's personal data, whether it's social media content, photos, and whatnot. But it's a little bit amorphous because the whole idea is this decentralized. There's no central entity, so it's kind of like, how do you fight? So I'm not convinced I personally, I think Web3 might be a fad as well. It would just blow over, just like blockchain was a big fad. 5-10 years ago, the term blockchain, it's not Bitcoin, it's blockchain, right? And then talk about DeFi. DeFi is everything, and now it's like Web3 is everything. So I think that's gonna blow over too.
I mean, based on your description of it, I think kind of some of those individual pieces, but I think the idea of being able to tokenize things and be able to carry that sort of with you, and how, we continue to see these shifts, centralized, decentralized, and I think we continue, obviously it's been very centralized recently. Maybe it moves to more decentralized kind of model. So I think there's going to continue to be these kind of shifts and reactions and such. To me, the most interesting part of that, and again, this is probably a little bit of maybe a geeky or a nerdy response, is some of the tokenization pieces of this. And tokenomics. Okay, I like that. Where this could be really interesting is, as we start thinking, and not to bring in another buzzy term of large language models and such, you could imagine, one of the hard things I think in that area is even just being able to create a token around a piece of content, and then how does that content, somebody writes something that later ends up in an LLM. How do you sort of start giving credit and things of that nature back to that? And that's a really interesting, hard problem. And if nobody gets any credit for original writing, or you can't make a living as an original writer, that creates a lot of really interesting challenges about new content generation and such. Yes. But I think kind of that idea of being able to tokenize some piece of content and trace that throughout different pieces, that strikes me as a pretty interesting potential reuse of some of this technology.
If that's doable.
Yeah.
It's not clear to me it is.
That may be fair. Yeah. But I think that idea of being able to kind of tag things tag and tokenize things in a way is kind of interesting, and how that will kind of live throughout some of this process. To me, that feels like, I don't know if it's, as you said, I don't know whether it's possible or not, but that feels like a very durable problem. That will have legs. Whether what is being labeled and packaged as Web3, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Good. All right, good, very good. Thank you for being on the Bobby Lee Bitcoin podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a good chat. We've talked about everything from Bitcoin, the early days, to the latest Web3, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, and hope to see you again on the next show.